Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the u3a radio podcast, which is also available on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. I'm Nick Bailey, and in this month's episode, we hear about a radio station designed for baby boomers.
So we felt it was time that there was a radio station for people like us who are not old, who don't feel old, who don't want to be treated as old. We just happen to dare to be our age.
A former cancer nurse will give advice on how to deal with a life-threatening diagnosis.
I think if you get that sort of diagnosis, if you're healthy enough or well enough, especially after treatment, go and live your life to the full.
And we find out how the Northants Network almost walked the equivalent of the Earth's circumference.
We walked 24,199 miles in total. It's an astonishing achievement.
But first, did you ever secretly dream of being an astronaut or wondered about space travel? Well, someone who is turning this dream into reality is Sean Cleaver. Sean is a spacecraft engineer at Airbus, working on the Orion program, part of the Artemis series of missions, which will return humans to the moon. She's currently working on the support module, which is the bit of the spacecraft just behind the capsule where the astronauts live and work. Some of you may remember Sian from the talk she gave to u3a earlier this summer. Peter Clift recently spoke to Sian in her office in Bremen in Germany and asked if her interest in astronomy had started when she was very young.
So I was lucky enough to visit Kennedy Space Center as a child, and I was about 5 years old, I think the first time we went there. And it was at that age that already I knew that I wanted to have something to do with space when I grew up. I wanted to be an astronaut, of course. And then throughout my childhood, that sort of turned into an interest in astronomy. I had a little toy telescope when I was about 8 years old, and I used to do astronomy. And I became a fully fledged member of a proper astronomy club at about 13 or 14 years old and had my first proper telescope.
And then you went on to Durham University, studied physics and astronomy.
We had a focus on astronomy at Durham University, and we did a lot of our lab modules on the roof of the building, observing the stars. So that was pretty fun, really.
Brings up to date now. You're working. Well, tell us what you are working on at the moment.
So after university, I started working for what's now known as Airbus Defence and Space. So Airbus don't just produce aircraft, they also do a lot of other things. And one of those things is space. So satellites, spacecraft. So that's where I went straight after university. And I was originally working on a lot of science and exploration missions, mostly for the European Space Agency. And then I sort of got wind that over in Germany, Airbus were doing human spaceflight. And of course, that was my dream. That was where I wanted to go. So about nearly 4 years ago now, I transferred over to the Orion European Service Module project, which is in Bremen in Germany. We're building something very exciting here. We really are. It's the service module that sits behind the crew module that will be used on the Artemis program. So we're responsible for making a series of these modules. We're just about to launch our first one on the Artemis 1 mission. So that's what we're doing here in Bremen. We're building this one module, this service module, but it's a pretty important module.
So the idea is eventually to put people back on the moon.
Absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of people say, well, why are we going again? Isn't it just the same as Apollo? But actually, the Artemis program is going a bit further than Apollo ever went. This time, we're trying to go back to the moon and have a bit more of a sustainable human presence on the moon. We're not just going for a few days at a time and coming back with a few rocks. We're going there to try to test out technologies, to test out new infrastructures, and to see whether we can sustain human life for extended periods, so being weeks this time. So we're going to go there with infrastructure. We will gradually build up an orbiting gateway space station around the moon. We will build up, hopefully, habitats on the lunar surface. We'll explore the lunar surface, do science, but also really it's all about proving that we are capable of living on another planetary body. And of course, this is all done with Mars in mind.
So the ultimate plan will be to get to Mars.
That's always been on the horizon in the space industry for a long time now. But of course, Mars is not easy. It's really, really far away. It's deep, deep space. The radiation environment is very severe. There's the requirement that you'd have to take everything there with you. You'd have to sustain yourself using just the things that you can take with you to the planet Mars. So really, we're using the moon now as a bit of a stepping stone in the sense that we'll be using it to develop technologies and capabilities, but also perhaps a physical stepping zone as well. It could be that going onto Mars from an outpost that's already in space, such as maybe the Gateway space station, maybe that's more fuel efficient and easier for us to get to Mars. So yeah, it's really sort of the intermediate step in between this big ambition of going to another planet.
Mars is a long, long way away, and you say it's pretty inhospitable. So I've got to ask the question, why do you want to go to Mars?
Well, I think it's this thirst for knowledge, isn't it? We want to understand more about ourselves. We want to understand more about the solar system, where we've come from, what makes up a planet, the history of the evolution of the solar system. There are so many big questions that we want to answer from a science perspective. But I think for me as well, I mean, the space industry is all about developing, growing, learning. And let's not forget that if we improve technology for specific missions, let's say to the moon or to Mars, it will inevitably have a knock-on effect on other space activities.
If I could, as it were, bring you back to Earth, the thing I know that you're very keen on is getting rid of the gender stereotypes. How was it for you as a young lady getting on in aerospace, which is pretty male-dominated, I would have thought?
Again, it's one of those things that I realized only a little bit later on in my career. When I was growing up, I was surrounded by really supportive people. Nobody ever said, no, you can't do that, or no, that's for boys. That was never said to me. And then I went to an all-girls secondary school. And then at university, I was doing physics. So I don't think the gender imbalance is quite as severe as it is for engineering at university. But entering the workplace, yes, then I noticed it, particularly in my first role. I remember, we had a big open plan floor plate, essentially. I remember looking around and saying, one other woman on the whole of the floor plate, and she was the personal assistant to one of the bosses. So then it kind of struck me, and I kind of felt a little bit different in that sense, because I then later moved to a different site at Airbus, and it was a lot more diverse. There were all sorts of people from different countries in Europe, and lots more women in that setup. And come on, I mean, we're putting the first woman on the moon, so we might as well, we'd better have women, working to design these missions as well.
What can we do to encourage our daughters and indeed granddaughters who might want to go into the sciences?
I think for me, it starts very young. I think making sure that all children have access to a variety of toys, maybe more traditionally male toys, not just preserved for the boys. Let's open those up to everyone, and making sure that everybody's got access to those really allows you to find your niche. I mean, I had a lot of Lego as a child, and I'm sure there's studies out there that correlate playing with Lego to being, successful in engineering careers later on. So I really strongly believe in access to toys across the board, and just generally encouraging at a very young age, using language quite carefully, not labeling things as being for boys or for girls, because I know it sounds quite insignificant, but I really strongly think that those stick with us subconsciously.
Well, here you are now, heavily involved in space projects. Do you have to sometimes, with respect, an ordinary girl from Chelmsford, do you have to kind of pinch yourself sometimes and say, is this for real?
The most incredible experience. I was at Kennedy Space Center, and I had this sudden moment of realization when I was collecting my badge. I was like, hang on a minute. The last time I was here, I was a child at the visitor center with mum and dad, dreaming of being an astronaut. And I was just about to start a day of work at Kennedy Space Center. It was a bit of a moment. I think I hadn't quite realized how important that would be for me. Wow, I did it.
And where do you see space research going? How do you see it developing over the next few years?
I think we're on the precipice of something really exciting. I think this whole new chapter that we're starting now with lunar exploration in a slightly different way this time, more sustainable way, I think that's going to be hugely exciting. I think we'll make some big advancements in technology. We'll prove a lot of things to ourselves, and it will really sort of open the doors to all sorts of things that were science fiction before. I'm very excited for the future, and also feeling quite lucky that I'm in the space industry at this time, really.
Sean Cleaver from Airbus, living the dream, and who knows, one day we may be commuting to Mars. Did you have a childhood ambition like Sean that you managed to realise? If so, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us an email to communications@u3a.org.uk. And from launching rockets to launching a radio station. And you wouldn't think that setting up a national radio station during a pandemic would be a bright idea. But that's exactly what Boom Radio did in February of last year. and the gamble has paid off with already almost 340,000 listeners tuning in every week. The aim of the station is to attract baby boomers, hence the name. And with the average age of u3a membership currently at 74, it sounds like a radio station tailor-made for the organisation. I'm joined now by one of the co-founders of Boom Radio, David Lloyd. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Can we first of all establish what a baby boomer is?
Oh, definitions vary. Officially, it's people born between 1946 and 1964, but we take a very generous view.
What made you launch the station?
We felt that people our age, people in their 60s and 70s, 80s and beyond, felt that radio now no longer spoke to them. It wasn't playing the music that they really liked, and every voice they heard probably sounded like somebody a lot younger who didn't relate really, who didn't have the sort of conversation that they were enjoying having. So we felt it was time that there was a radio station for people like us who are not old, who don't feel old, who don't want to be treated as old. We just happen to dare to be our age. And we felt there was an opening in the market as a lot of other radio stations shifted younger in their presentation talent and the music they were playing. And so we thought, hey, there's an idea. Let's see if there's anything in it. We researched it heavily, and the audience told us what we rather knew because we are our own audience. So that verified that. So we went and got some money and put a national radio station together.
Are you trying to attract from Radio 2 in particular?
Absolutely. We feel that Radio 2 has moved, and this is not a criticism of Radio 2. I can see exactly why they are moving younger, but they are, and they talk about it. They're going for their mood mums in their 30s and 40s and early 50s, and that means people older who used to enjoy Radio 2, and Radio 2 was their core, much adored listener, and they probably loved Ken Bruce. They used to like the whole of Radio 2, but increasingly they're thinking, this isn't the same sort of place it used to be. It's not the Radio 2 I remember. I say, this is not a criticism. It is the reality. They have, no longer catering for an audience our age.
So what kind of music do you play?
We, again, researched this, but it's self-evident that whatever research we did, 60s was hugely popular, the 1960s music. So we're not a sleepy radio station talking very slowly to old people. We're a radio station that's living life. So 60s is right at the heart of that. 70s as well, probably the second most popular decade. 50s, yes, I mean, certainly for the top end of the baby boomers, they love the 50s. The 50s are sprinkled in, but also 80s, 90s and beyond, just a light sprinkling of those, because we do play some current songs. There are some, wouldn't it be sad if we said that every great record that's ever been released has been? We're quite excited when we've got something new that we introduce to our audience. If you like all these great oldies, have a listen to this. So we play a little bit of new because we are a radio station for now. Although we played loads and loads of familiar oldies, we're a radio station for 2022, living life to the full.
So, okay, you did your research, but launching it during a pandemic sounds like not a terribly good business idea.
Well, you're right. I mean, luckily, the plan was always to have a virtual radio station, and that, you turn on the radio and it's there. But actually, there are no premises. Every one of our presenters delivers their program from their back bedroom or their attic. So David Hamilton's comes in the afternoon from his farmhouse in Sussex. Mine comes from my little corner of my house here in Nottingham. And so it goes on. So we were never going to have, central premises. So we were already very socially distant. So in a sense, that was rather easy to deliver. That was always the plan, and that's how it continues to this day. But yes, during a pandemic, first of all, the economy was really challenging for the launch. And secondly, installing equipment. We had to install computers and microphones in people's houses. Some people who never used a computer before, we were teaching them the skills of, you were going to go on air on your own, David Hamilton, in your attic next week. Let's get you sorted. So we had to take kit round in hazmat gear and get people sorted. But we made it.
What was the attitude of presenters you approached? Because not just David Hamilton, but you've got Kid Jensen, I think you've got Graham Dean at breakfast. What was their feeling towards it?
We picked up the phone to some presenters who are, I think radio presenters are at their very best when they're in their 60s and 70s. You've lived life. You're never short of things to talk about, and you can relate to just about everything and everybody. So presenters are at their best, and yet spurned by media because they're too old. They can't have these old faces on the radio anymore. So these people were so hungry for this opportunity. So without exception, everybody said, yes, we'd love to. And, let's be honest, a few of our lineup said, I didn't think I was going to get a decent job on a national radio station again. This is wonderful.
And you mentioned national. So how can people actually listen in?
So we broadcast on DAB right across the UK. We're on a network which probably reaches about 84% of households, so pretty decent coverage there on DAB. And we're available online, as they say, which means on smart speakers like the one beginning with A and the one beginning with G, and we're on there. And about a half our listening is on devices other than a radio set. So you can get us on most DAB, the most modern DAB radios in most places, and also online.
And you can get it on your iPhone, of course.
You can get it on your iPhone, your tablet, and your personal computer and whatnot. Yes, absolutely.
It's been incredibly successful. Were you surprised?
I think we were surprised by how quickly the audience grew. I mean, as you say, third of a million now, and we have every reason to believe it's going to go considerably north of that in the next 6 months. So we knew there was a market there. We didn't realize quite how quickly it was going to grow. But the other thing, Nick, is just the level of passion. I've been in this radio business almost as long as you have, not quite. And I've never known a response like it. I mean, hundreds, now thousands of emails saying, somebody said, you've made my retirement complete. Just lovely phrases like that. And certainly for people who, happen to be on their own for whatever reason, who say, you are company. Somebody said, since my husband died last year, you have been my constant companion. I mean, I'm welling up talking about these things because it's so touching when you read these comments from people who are depending on you. We're not deemed a public service. We're a commercial radio operation. But goodness, we are delivering some public service and having great fun doing it too.
And what's the aim audience-wise? How many people would you like to have listening to you?
Well, there are a lot of people aged over 55 across the United Kingdom. So, the sky is the limit. We're limited by our marketing budget. We're limited to a certain extent by the platforms, if we can put it like that we're delivered on, because we don't have the benefit of FM and universal DAB as the BBC do. But our immediate plan is for 1 million. And I can see us getting to 1 million listeners in a relatively short time.
David Lloyd, I wish you the best of luck. David from Boom Radio. Thank you so much for talking to us. Unfortunately, one thing we have to contend with as we get older is illness. And serious illness is something many of us will experience either personally or through family and friends. But how best to deal with what could be devastating news? This subject is explored in a book called After a Life-Threatening Diagnosis, What Next?, which has been written by a former midwife, intensive care specialist, and cancer nurse, Carolyn Hornblow of Stewardship u3a in Scotland. Carolyn has worked in America and Australia, as well as the UK, and she's been speaking to Joanne Watson.
From the time of diagnosis to the time when it's deemed whether that treatment has been successful or not could be 3 to 5 years. Take, for example, breast cancer, because you're going to go through surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, or a mix of that, and time in between. And it's that period of time that is not addressed very well by all of us, because we don't like in society to talk about death and dying, even though we're all going to do it. We prepare for births and marriages, but we don't prepare for death because we believe it's morbid and it might somehow speed up dying. I mean, a lot of people don't make wills for that very reason. They deem it negative, or they don't feel they've got enough money to bother to make a will. It's important to have your details on record. Simple things like, computer passwords or telephone passwords, because the majority of your friends and family won't know all that. They won't know which bank account you've got all your money in or who your lawyer is. And these things written down make life so much easier for your friends and family when you do die, whether you're 50 or 100. Equally, the last part of the book is about how to live life now, how to enjoy life, how to be grateful for what you have, and for making amends. If you've upset somebody, try to make amends, even if it's simply writing a letter and posting it up the fireplace or just tearing it up. It's getting it off your chest. The chief thing really is I encourage people, once they've got over the shock of having a diagnosis that could be life-threatening, is to start to talk about your fears of dying, because we all will have that. That's just a natural human reaction. And if we can reduce some of the stress of that, we will heal better. So let's say if you're 100% full of stress, if you talk about your fears with friends and family, and hopefully the medical and nursing profession, maybe that'll diminish the degree of stress to 80%. well, then that gives you 20% more potential for healing, because that negative stress can be converted into positive healing.
Don't you just think, though, that impacts on the person you're talking to, because it must be depressing, and it just pushes the stress back onto them?
We're all uncomfortable, all of us, doctors and nurses included, about talking about death. But family, particularly, family and friends, they don't know what to say. So I think if the patient who's thinking in the middle of the night, oh my goodness, what if I don't make it? If they're allowed by the family simply to open up a little bit and express their thoughts, they don't have to be morbid. It doesn't have to be a deep 4-hour session. It could be just come out in bits. But for the person to say, look, I have cancer and I'm scared, it gives an opening door to family and friends to be able to say, how can I help you? But we do need to get rid of this taboo about not talking about death. And it's gradually happening. We are having like what they call death cafes, where people go who are not well, who will gather and talk amongst each other. Because if you're within a group of people who are going through it, there's a lot of communication and talk about fears. There are great centres called Maggie centres, about 14, 15 at the moment in Britain, that encourage people to come there to talk about their stress and their concerns, and there are counsellors. And the reason they got started is that Maggie Keswick, who actually was a local resident around here, was diagnosed with breast cancer in the doctor's office and had nowhere to go, didn't know how she could talk about her worries and her concerns. So she actually, along with her husband, created the Maggie Centre concept. And they're very popular with the people who are going through, and relatives who also have a need to talk about potential, loss.
People used to say that when you retired, the next step was death, but you have a mantra which I suppose applies to everybody: live life now.
I think if you get that sort of diagnosis, if you're healthy enough or well enough, especially after treatment, go and live your life to the full. And ideally, I think we should live our life to the full from the time that we are conscious, because so many people wait till they're retired to live. Well, why not enjoy your life now as best you can? I mean, start the bucket list early in life, because it's not just old people that die. It's every age. I think retirement is a very exciting time of life. I have had more fun and more joy since I've retired than ever before. I mean, I've enjoyed my life up till now, but now I have me time and I can go and do whatever I want, when I want. Happiness is not based on the Jaguar or a big house. Happiness is an inside job. So develop that. Enjoy what you have in life. A nice garden, good friends, whatever it happens to be. And yes, get hobbies, because there's an awful lot of loneliness. That's a big killer, if you like, because it causes depression and sadness. And so get out there, join companies like u3a. I think the u3a is marvelous because you meet new friends, you develop new interests, or develop interests you had as a youngster that you couldn't do because you got busy working. So yes, that's why this book I've written is essentially it's positive. It's about getting organized and then living life. We only have today. We can have our memories and we can have our hopes for the future, but the reality is today. So live it and enjoy it.
Carolyn Hornblow, and Carolyn's book, After a Life-Threatening Diagnosis, What Next?, is published by Routledge and available through Amazon. And details of Maggie's centres can be found by a simple internet search. In a previous episode, we spoke to Tony Mays, a Northamptonshire u3a member who was helping to coordinate u3a's 40th anniversary celebrations county-wide with a mile-a-member walking challenge and a day of celebration that involved all 13 u3as in the Northants Network. Sarah Goodall caught up with Tony after the event to find out how it all went.
It went extremely well. We had nearly 500 people attended at Chester House Estate. We had an opening ceremony conducted by Councillor Helen Howell and Jean Hogg, the regional representative. And we had a tremendous day. We had displays in the threshing barn from 7 of our u3as. And they were all showing different aspects of their work, from photography to creative writing to shared learning to painting, a whole card craft and needlecraft. So we had a whole range of activities from 7 of our u3as in the threshing barn. We had entertainment from 4 of our u3as, including singing for fun and a ukulele group and a Tai Chi group. So we had some outdoor activities to watch. And we had the culmination of the Mile and Member Walking Challenge as well.
What was the result of that?
We walked 24,199 miles in total. It's an astonishing achievement.
Yeah.
And the pleasing thing about it was that all 13 of the Northamptonshire u3as contributed towards the mileage. Some did more than others, but some joined the challenge later than others. But overall, we had 100% contribution from our u3as.
It sounds like a really worthwhile event, Tony, and worth all the trouble that you and several other people had gone to.
Yes, and people were genuinely enthused by it. As the challenge gained momentum, it was also a good opportunity for the u3as to work together. In the past, for National U3A Day, the u3as have done their own thing and worked independently. But for this particular challenge, they all still worked autonomously, so they did the challenge in their own particular way, but they were all aiming for the same final endpoint. So it was a good example of network of u3as working together.
Tony Mays from the Northants Network, and that figure of 24,199 miles is only 700 miles short of walking around the world. After the Mile a Member Challenge, Tony and his wife Nita captured on tape some of the walkers' thoughts.
Well, I've obviously enjoyed walking anywhere with a u3a walking group, and walking for a purpose has added an added zing to it, I think. And we walk otherwise as well, and it's been nice to try and get those miles in and tote them up to Tony, who did all the collation on that. A lot of people enjoy, of course, the other great thing about walking Mile is the social side of it. Lots of people, some of those who live on their own, really enjoy the social side of the walking, and it's been a great event.
When I joined the walking group, I didn't really know what to expect, but it has really made a difference. I used to walk on my own, and now it's wonderful to walk with other people, and I've made such good friends and been to places that I wouldn't usually have visited.
I think the main thing that I get from it is the companionship and the exercise that we do on the walks, and the companionship is amazing. The friends that we've made over the years and the walks that we've done have been wonderful, and finding out about Northamptonshire in particular, with all the small walks that we do around the local villages and all the facts of history, have been quite remarkable.
When we joined the Mile a Member Challenge, it gave us a great opportunity to enjoy the environment, the countryside, and make friends.
Companionship and exercise at the same time. What more could you want? Oh, maybe a drink at an atmospheric pub in front of a log fire once the walk is over. Nearly 25,000 miles is quite an achievement, not to mention the events at Chester House. So well done to all the Northamptonshire members who took part on what must have been a great day of celebration. And that's where we end this month's episode. But before I go, a reminder of our email address if you'd like to tell us of anything happening in your area, or indeed something unusual that you or a fellow member have done recently. It's communications@u3a.org.uk. My thanks to Peter Clift, Joanne Watson and Sarah Goodall for the interviews, and to Ella Watts for producing the podcast. Until next time, this is Nick Bailey saying goodbye.